Hey there everybody, welcome to Tucktuk, Trinkets, and Terrain. My name's David, and for this week's video I built a small set of some desert-themed structures. They are all modular, so I can stack them on top of each other, move the awnings around, things like that, so they're really flexible, which is super cool. So I'm going to show you what I did and how I did it, and I hope you enjoy. So like most projects, this started off with some XPS foam that I've cut into length that I'm going to hot glue together just to make the general structure, using a square here to make sure all my corners are straight. I do end up making 4 buildings like you saw in the intros. Most of the video here is going to show the sort of middle building. But here's the middle one as well as the 2 small ones. I did my best to think ahead and plan out the dimensions and sizes to make sure everything fits nicely on top of each other to give as much modularity and flexibility as possible. For the roofs, I just cut out some squares of some dollar store foam board, and then I wanted to add sort of a railing or fence to the top of all the structures, and I'm just going to use some more XPS foam cut into some long squares to build that fence. I do make sure to leave space for some ladders that I wanted to add eventually. And then to fill in all the gaps between the seams of all the different pieces of foam, I'm just using some joint compound and just pushing it into all the different edges and gaps to try and smooth that out as much as possible. And then I went ahead and base coated all of the structures with black paint and Mod Podge, but I also mixed in just a whole bunch of super fine sand. I finally found this at a reasonable price. I don't know why it was so hard to find in my area, but I picked a bunch up and I thought this would be the perfect opportunity to try it out and make a texture paste. So I slathered this on quite thick. I wanted to give as much of that texture as possible to all my structures. And then while that was drying, I moved on to making a bunch of windows and doors, just using some chipboard as bases. So I've got these sort of shuttered ones that were layered cardstock. These longer ones that are, I think, popsicle sticks. I wasn't sure which way I could use them, but either way works. I made a set of double doors for the largest building, and then I made a bunch of these. These were supposed to be like fur doors, where it's just a fur or animal skin flap. Wasn't too successful, but I think it works enough, at least for me. And then once those were all done, I grabbed my buildings again. You can see this is it dry. You can see all the nice ultrafine sand. It gave it a really nice texture. And then rather than glue all of my doors and windows just on top of the structure, I decided to recess them in a little bit. And since they were all a little bit unique, a little bit wonky, since I wasn't super precise with them, I just used each one individually, traced them out with my X-Acto blade, and then used my blade to remove a thin layer of foam from the top here so that the doors and windows could sit nicely in the structure. And then just repeated that same process for all the accessories. I stuck with the sort of shuttered windows on the smaller buildings, and then again the sort of fancy wider windows on the larger structure. I made all the buildings different so that they were all unique. And then from here I went about painting the structures themselves. So I actually used 2 different paints here. I started using a tan color, but I ran out and I accidentally bought the wrong color, so I thought that I would mix them together and create sort of a 2-tone look. So the other one I got is a little bit more yellow, but just sort of swapping between the 2 colors, not cleaning the brush in between, letting them mix and sort of blend together. You can see with the larger brush here the difference between the 2 color paints. And once that was dry, you can kind of see the 2-toneness that ended up giving. It's kind of subtle, but I think it does help make it a little more just visually interesting, add some more dimensionality to the whole piece. But with that dry, I covered all the buildings with a brown wash. I thought that using my normal black wash would be a bit too dark, and I applied this pretty thin. I didn't want to make these too dark. And then once the wash was dry, I dry brushed everything with a ivory color, which really helps bring out all of the super awesome detail that the fine sand gave all these structures here. And these could be called done. other than maybe like the ladders, but I wanted to add some more details. So I created these little frames for some awnings. As you can see, they sort of just hook on to the tops of the fences here. That way I can move them around and put them wherever I need to for individual encounters. But for the sort of shade part itself, I'm just using the leftover pillowcase material that I used in my Witchlight Circus tent build. Just using some 50/50 white glue water to soak it in and then apply that to each of the awning structures. And then I used a little binder clip to weigh it down and make sure that the cloth was draping like it should. Once those were all dry, I trimmed up the excess along the edges to make them a little neater, a little straighter, as well as trimmed off a bit of the front just to, again, to clean them up a bit. I then picked out a couple bright colors, orange, red, and a green, with the buildings being kind of just a boring tan color. I thought this would be a good opportunity to give some brightness to everything. Now, in a lot of buildings, looking up some reference pictures online, there was lots of these exposed timbers that I assume are like the roof support beams that stick out of the walls, so I thought I would add some of those. These are just some XPS foam bits that I've textured and painted like wood, and after cutting them in half, I just glued these on to the structures to create those exposed wood beams. I can't say these are accurate to what some traditional desert structures would be, but in a lot of the sort of art that I looked up online, these were a pretty common theme. I then wanted to add a sort of feature wall to the largest structure. So this is just a very thin strip of XPS foam that I've textured and painted like brick. I thought this would be sort of a cool, unique feature to the large structure. Maybe this was like a repaired wall, or a architect from a different culture or with different techniques came in and built this part of the structure. Maybe the little bit that hangs out the end is an addition, which is why the brick is there, something along those lines. So I just wrapped it around the little offshoot here at the end. Now, like I said before, I wanted to add some ladders so I could stack these buildings and make them climbable. These are just some simple craft sticks that I've sort of carved into a rough hewn look, painted wood, and then I'm just gluing these on to all of the openings that I made before in the roof fencing. I also went ahead and made a couple small scatter pieces for these. So I made this sort of simple cactus planter, as well as a bunch of these little cactus potted plants. The planter is just some XPS foam with sand and the little plants, and the potted plants are just a bead with those same plants glued right on top. For one last touch, I decided to use some of the pigment powders that I've made and dust the bottoms of the buildings as well as the roofs. So I just used some browns, some oranges, and a little bit of the gray. And then after sealing all those in with some clear coat spray, everything is all finished. Now, these are the two smallest buildings with one of the awnings on there with a few of the potted plants as well. This is the middle structure. If I was better at planning ahead, I think I could have done a little bit better in terms of the modularity. Thought out more where the doors and windows were. In some situations when I was messing around and experimenting with the different ways that I could use these, sometimes there's doors that lead to nowhere, windows get covered oddly, things like that, but I don't mind that too much. But again, I think if I were to make more of these in the future, I'll try to do a little better in that respect. But here's a few ways that I can set these up. These are, again, super modular. I'm really happy with how these turned out. I can fill my little board here very easily, with just these 4 pieces. If you did enjoy the video, I would appreciate it if you hit the like button and subscribed for future videos. I post crafting videos every other Friday. I also have an Instagram account that you can check out. I post in-progress pictures and other things that I've got going on. And I also have an Etsy shop where you can pick up dungeon tiles and accessories to use in your tabletop games. Both of those links can be found in the description below. But more than anything, thank you so much for stopping by. We'll see you next time.